Got it? Well, this is a little tough for me. This isn't exactly my personality to be up here. I don't know if there's anybody else out there that gets the, when you start talking in front of people. And I figured it'd probably be better for me to get through this if I just don't pretend like I know what I'm doing. And, just let you know, I have not had a chance to do this before. This is really just something that we spoke about. Where'd you go, Bill? Okay. Bill and I talked, what was it, 2 weeks ago? Not even 2 weeks ago. We were talking. I had a chance to go up to a place in San Francisco. Actually, it was the San Francisco Central Church. And Amazing Facts was putting on a series. Actually, it's not really a series. It's more of a 4-day session on evangelism and how to revive the church and bring back, the membership and fill the church and kind of the how-tos, the things that we don't think about when it comes to reaching people, and how to effectively do that. So I went to that. It was 4 days. I came back. I was charged. I'd never been to something like that before. I haven't been to school in years, and it was kind of it was a good thing to go back, and to listen to Spirit-filled people who love the Lord, that may have made that their life. Amazing Facts wants to change the world, and I think that that's something that resonated with me. Am I mumbling, or can you hear me okay? Can you understand me? Because when I get nervous, I mumble. So if I start doing that, somebody go, hey, Anyway, so I wasn't even sure I was going to end up doing this until middle of this week, and everything went to heck. I thought, well, I'll do my best. Every night I'll work on it, but during the day, in business, I have a business, and people need things, and customers want things, and they are not going to care if I tell them, hey, I've got to be up front on Saturday. They're like, well, good, do your job, So anyway, I'm going to try and get through this, and I appreciate Bill helping me out. I didn't have enough chance to put some pictures up. I did a few last night and this morning, but hopefully you get a blessing from it. And anyway, anybody not know who I am? Somebody, please. Thank you. Well, I was going to say good, but I think everybody pretty well. Everybody knew I was preaching today before I did, I think. I was kind of hoping to sneak in here and really, it sounds bad, but I was hoping most of you probably wouldn't even be here. Is that because Bill told everybody to get to see something new? Somebody stumble? My name's Bryce, and I shouldn't stand over there. I've been an Adventist all my life. I was born into the Adventist church. Southern Oregon, I don't know if you know where Medford area is. I went to a little church called Shady Point. It's kind of somewhere between Eagle Point and Shady Cove, so that's why they call it that. I grew up. It was a small church. It was much smaller than this. In fact, it was probably seated a couple hundred people max. But my parents took us there every day of our life. My grandparents as well, when they couldn't. I went to an Adventist academy. I've been through the system. I heard it all. I saw it. But I didn't really get it. Has anybody been an Adventist all their life? Ever struggled with what I've told you? Well, I went out into the world, and when I left home, I left at an early age. And when I would go downtown and I would see things like this, I would get excited, and I would say, hey, you know what, that's life, that's the world. Looks like things are happening. But this is kind of where I came from. That's what it looks like today. That's not the exact, because I didn't have the picture, but it's just like it. I was out in the country. We grew up in a really humble environment. I didn't like it. I didn't appreciate it. I thought that all my friends had a better life, and the city was why is that doing that? Is that okay? I thought, well, there's got to be something better out there. I'm going to pursue my life, kind of like the prodigal son. Decided, hey, you know what? Whatever it is I've got, I don't want it. There's more excitement somewhere else. Backwards. So when I was 18, I took the only thing that I owned, In fact, it was the day I think I turned 18. I rebelled. I said, that's it. I'm out of here. See you, Mom and Dad. I'm moving to California. 800-mile drive. And everything I owned fit in the back of that thing, including my big 15-inch stereo system. You guys remember those things, where I was so proud of that. I drove down all night long. I didn't stop. I was listening to that system. I was so excited to get down here and make friends and, finish high school and do things. And, I thought it was all going to be good. As I went out into the world, once I finished high school, I really just didn't have much more exposure with the church. I lived with some relatives that just basically told me, hey, look, you know what? You're out of high school now. It's your time. Go get it, And I said, whoa, that's scary, because I didn't have a job. There was no real guarantee that I was going to have a place to live once they said, hey, you know what? You need to go. And I started, wandering around out there with the world, rubbing shoulders with people that just really did not have God as a priority. And little by little, I started to believe that if I didn't make it happen, nobody was going to. I didn't remember those things that I had learned in church when I was a kid. It didn't come to my mind when I was terrified about life, when I thought, someday I may be back in that trailer, and I wanted so desperately to get away from that. And I just didn't remember that there was somebody who said, I'm going to be with you, and it was not fun. When I did get to the point where I remembered that Jesus did say all those things, and there was a couple points in my life where I cried my heart out to him, and I said, look, if you're real, if everything I learned in life is real, then you're going to need to show me now, because I'm in a tough spot. And it's another story for another day, but there was one time he actually spoke to me, and I heard it just like you hear me now. And it started to make a change in my life. In fact, it was a big faith builder. It really was. He said something very important. He said, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. And in my life, that's been probably the most important thing that he said, especially right now, because I kind of need him. Back. 22 years later, I take a look at what I've been blessed with. When I moved to California, none of those people were in my life, just like probably when you had your children, right? You look back on that day too, and you go, that was amazing. I hardly remember life before that, but to have a wife that cares about you, loves you, puts up with you, 3 children that I couldn't buy with everything in the world. I'm very blessed. I have a business. God took a look at my situation, and he said, you know what? I'm going to make sure he doesn't go back to that trailer. He's going to know that I was with him, that I was the giver, that he was the one that was full of blessing. I have my own home. I have toys. I have things that I'm sure all of you do too, It's things that make life enjoyable. It's blessings that we've got, It's more, it reminds me that I've got more than what I really need. And what I have to ask myself is, am I grateful? Am I grateful? Because it's easy to get sidetracked, right? Maybe I'm the only one, but for me, it was it can be a distraction. Just the responsibility of things, just taking care of things, just the idea that, if things don't go right, I'm going to lose all that, It's something that I have to set aside, and I have to say, look, if I'm going to be, this businessman who's taking all the enjoyment in life, he's celebrating a full life. He's, what's that? And then some, yeah. He's got a lot to think about, and and it's something that I think that we do too. When I grew up in the country, my dad would always tell me, son, you need to be grateful for what you've got. And that's hard to say when you think, Dad, I haven't got anything. But he said, you know what? Animals, they eat. Some of them look up to see who's feeding them. Some of them seem to appreciate it, but then there's some that don't. And I think a lot of people in life just go through it, and we don't really take a look at what the cost was for us to get where we are, and why the world is still going on. Somebody had to go through a lot of trouble in their life just so we could get to our generation. And it's a bigger picture than what we really think about. So Jesus comes in when you start to feel that you may not have been appreciative, and he's maybe, and that's the reason why, really, that you feel that. He's knocking on your heart. He's knocking on that door, and he's saying, "Hey, you know what? Really, you appreciate me? You want to be there? Good. I got something for you to do." He kind of puts out the help wanted sign, and we see it. We get it. We know that there's something that we need to be doing. But are we inclined to do it? And what does it cost? Do we have to get out of our comfort zone? Do we have to be personally responsible, or is it just the pastor, responsible, or the evangelist, or the guy that we're going to bring in? Is it somebody else all the time? One thing I forgot to say though, but God, when He does call you, He's only got, from what I can see, one qualification. It's not like when you're going to a job interview and you've got to go down the checklist and they're interviewing you and they're being critical and they're saying, hey, do you have the skills? Do you have this? Do you have that? God doesn't need that. All He wants you to do is just be willing. And what He wants us to do, and this is something that we talked about at AFCO, and that is that if we are going to take what's called the good news to the world, the gospel, that, we need to go out and we need to make friends, and we need to reach out to the people in the world, even the church. I've been a member here for, I don't know, I think it's probably close to 10 years, actually. Close to 10 years, anyway. And during that time, or not during the time, but probably for the first 5 years, only 2 people in this church ever really reached out to me. And I really appreciated it when they did. But I wasn't really coming to church much because I really didn't feel, even though I was an Adventist and I knew I belonged here or some other Adventist church, I didn't feel the need really to come and be somewhere where I didn't really feel wanted, or I wasn't going to be a part of. I didn't have the opportunity like I've got now, but just the opportunity to to help out, to be a small part of something bigger. And Jesus is calling me, He's calling you to do that. And this is the church, right? Isn't that what we are? It's not the building, it's the people. It's the church of God. And when I take a look around the church and I start to ask questions, something concerns me maybe. Are we grateful? Is the reason that we come to church just something to do between breakfast and lunch? When the pastor gets up and he says, hey, are you guys getting impatient? It seems like people want to get going. I think that that it's probably gotten to be a routine. And if we're not appreciative of what God has done, when it comes time to give praise, raise our hand, speak up, and say, hey, you know what? I came here to worship God, to praise Him, to give Him thanks. And And it's my time. And where else can it be easier to do? Is it easy to do that in the world? Can't be as easy as it is here. But it's so quiet. And so I have to wonder, do we really know what God did for us? Do we enough to appreciate it? And if we do, is it our personal responsibility? Did we put him up there? Did we drive those nails? Did we put him through more torture than he really needed to because we were going to be so stubborn, because we were going to be so full of iniquity and sin, and we were going to give up on him so many times and break so many promises and treat that sacrifice like it's not worth what it was. Kind of reminds me of ancient Israel. You guys know the stories in the Bible. Ancient Israel had the sacrificial system. They had the worship system. They had their church. That's where we follow somewhat in their footsteps today. It's the same Savior. It's the same Lord. Yet when he shows up on the scene the first time, Israel's not even really looking for him. But they were going to church, right? They were members of the church. They were members of God's people. They were God's people. And yet they're looking for somebody else. He doesn't really fit the bill. They were looking for a ruler who would come and give them the world instead of call them out of it. He just didn't offer enough. And I kind of laughed when I saw this. I had some help, and good job, Billy. He picked out most of these pictures. And, I just thought, that's kind of what I grew up with. This, I grew up vegetarian. Probably a lot of you did. Maybe most of you. I didn't find it particularly entertaining when I got out in the world, and I left it. But I remember this kind of attitude. We are so when I go and this is not meant to be offensive, but when I go to a restaurant now, and I've been all over the world, and I've eaten things I never should have eaten, and I've been places and done things just not to offend people that I'm with. But when I go to a restaurant now with another Adventist who's very, very particular about what they're eating and all the questions that get asked, I almost get embarrassed. Not that we shouldn't, but I'm like, man, I kind of forgot a lot, And it just reminded me of this. Well, I might have had a slide or two mixed up here, but what I was trying to say with this slide is that when Jesus came the first time, they weren't looking for him, okay, which I've already said. But they were looking for somebody else. This time, according to what I read, they're going to get what they were looking for, right? The false Christ is coming first. And I used to think that he would have come already. When I was a kid in my 20s, I thought the year 2000 would never come, right? And you thought that, the end of the world had to be somewhere around there. And here we are, just cruising along. But what if, you guys think, what if the deceiver had showed up as Christ already? What if he showed up tomorrow? Is our church in any position to say, hey, you know what, we're ready for that? Because have you ever thought about what that's going to be like in the world when that happens? If an angel of light that the world has never seen with more glory than we've ever experienced were to be here, and the entire almost Christian world, maybe the whole world, goes, hey, that's Jesus. Are we ready for that? Is that the time to start showing appreciation? Is that the time to start saying, hey, wait a minute, we've got something to do? Because it's coming. And then we will be either happy or we will be really sad. I think that the second coming, I know that the second coming is something that every generation on earth has looked forward to. They've, for 6,000 or more years now, looked for this particular day that may just happen. It may happen in our lifetime. And there's so many signs to say, yeah, it could. And when it does happen, it's going to be over in this world. God says he's going to make all things new. He's going to take away the evil, the sin, and whatever is in the world. And if it's in us, and if we're not appreciative, I don't know. I've been told he's coming for his friends, and I'm just thinking, am I his friend? Am I acting like his friend? Am I, if I didn't appreciate his son enough to tell others, would I be his friend? So I'm getting at something, I guess, and that is that we've got a problem, and it's a big one. A big one, right? Anybody like to fly? Yeah, I know Bill does. He does a lot of it. I do too, and I enjoy it. Anybody hate to fly? Let's put it that way. If you were already scared of flying and you looked out the window and you saw that, would Jesus be coming for you that day? You'd feel like it. I think that what is written in Revelation chapter 3 about a lukewarm church. Is there anybody here that would disagree if I said, hey, you know what? We kind of feel lukewarm. Would you guys agree? I almost... Houston, we have a problem. It didn't really fit my script, but I left it in there just to, try and, emphasize a point. When we're in trouble, is it hard for other people to see? Is the church kind of in a situation like that, in a sense that, look at the people behind him, everybody's looking, and everybody's looking at us, our church. Okay, because we are unique, whether we think so or not. We are unique. This is in the Christian world, and I've been there and I've talked to many, many of them. Hundreds of my customers and business colleagues and people all over the world. They may not know much about Adventists, but when they hear you are, they know you're different. And just that alone is enough to make people look and go, hey, wait a minute, are they doing what they should be? Is there anything that I want that's there? I guess I'm hitting this too much. If we don't, or let's put it this way, if our membership is at a low, and right now in here it doesn't really, I'm happy to see that we have I would say probably more than half of the seats here are filled, and that's great. But if we lose people in those pews, in those seats, we're losing our lifeblood. Am I connecting all this, or are you guys, did I miss something here? And that is kind of what was one of the first things to me when I came back to the church a few years ago and started taking a look at it seriously. And a few of you are responsible for me doing that, especially Dorothy, and I thank you for that. She has been a real blessing to me, and a reason why I was able to start taking another look at it. And it was discouraging, and I said, wait a minute, what's happened? Why isn't our church full? Why aren't we building bigger churches? Don't we have a reason to, if anybody else? And we find ourselves in a real problem. And we're in the crossfire, and there's really no easy way out for our church, if you're following me. If we don't do our job, where are we going to go? The world's not going to take us, right? Is this making sense? If God doesn't approve and the world doesn't approve, we're between a rock and a hard place. We've got to get up and move somewhere, and I think that's what that lukewarm situation is. If you're not hot and you're not cold, what are you? So I'm just going to take a few minutes from here and then wrap this up, and that is that the first thing that I would do, being in business, is I start to, if I have a question, I want an answer. And if the question is, why is it that the church is lukewarm, or why is it that we are losing members and it doesn't seem like we're really gaining them that fast? Maybe in the rest of the world we are, I don't know, but I'm talking about probably North America and maybe specifically Southeastern Conference. We need to take a look and see what's going on. Are we running our own ship, or do we need somebody to help us out with that? I wasn't sure. But in business, I'll get that over with.
It's more about you.
Oh, come on, everybody's already seen that one. In business, which is what I do. You guys have I don't know, anybody else in here in business ever owned your own business? Okay, I'll have to talk to you later. But you'll know what I'm talking about in a minute. We have a way about going about things, okay? And when we run into difficulties, we have to fix them, okay? It's not like the government or like the church in a sense. The church is a lot like a government. Neither one depends on its own performance, in a sense, for its income, okay? Now, if the church doesn't do its job and the membership drops, yeah, in that sense you're responsible for tithes, and offerings and revenue dropping. But in business, you're on your own, and if you don't stick with the program, then you're going to lose. You're not going to be in business. You're going to be looking for a job or something else to do, right? So in business, there are some things that we look at that will tell us if it's in trouble. And I thought, well, the church is kind of like a business, so why don't I make some parallels and see if any of these things make sense. So in a business, let me finish this up here, customer decline. If we see a customer decline in a business, what's going to happen? Well, it's not a good sign, right? If you have a lack of vital energy, a business needs energy. It needs what we call in business a sense of urgency. You've got to get up in the morning and stay ahead of what's going on, because there are forces at play that are constantly trying to push you down. There are things you have to overcome every single day, and you've got to be energetic. If you have an unbalanced customer profile, a way to explain that is if you're selling your business, and whoever's coming in to look at it sends in their accountant, and they say, hey, you know what? I see on your customer list that 50% of your income is coming from just a couple of customers, or maybe a handful of customers, and all the rest are, just pitching in a little. Well, that doesn't look good, because there's a problem there. There's a threat. What happens if they buy the business and you lose one or two of those main? Well, now your business isn't worth what it used to be. So that's a big thing that you have to watch out for. Loss of revenue. Well, that's related to probably everything above it, but loss of revenue is simply you're not making as much, or what you're trying to earn, whether it be product or money or whatever, you're just not getting it anymore. You're not getting what it was. Trying to think of this, the quote that basically says, failing to plan, plan to fail, okay? And even a plan is not enough. It has to be a good plan, and it has to be something you can adjust, and you've got to be able to make changes when the need arises. Well, I guess I covered that one already. No sense of urgency. There's a picture somewhere that I've seen that, it's got to do with African animals, When the tiger gets up, he knows he's got to be running. He's got to get up on the run because the game is already ahead of him, right? And when the game gets up, whether it be a deer or an elk or whatever, they've got to get up running because the tiger's right behind them, and it's that kind of a situation. You don't just get up and, go about your day like there's nothing really that needs to be done. If there isn't powerful leadership, if there isn't good leadership in a business and you have employees, it's not going to have direction. It's not going to last. It's not going to be going any specific place. And I think you already know where I'm going. If you're losing to competition, well, everything pretty much here is interrelated, But if you're losing to competition, well, you're going to lose customers. You're going to lose revenue. It's going to be. It's just another big sign that may show up first, but it's related to everything else. If you don't have effective advertising, well, again, that's related, right? If you don't advertise, how are you going to maintain as well as grow? And in business, if you're not growing, you're losing. Okay, that's pretty much the way it is. Because if you've got 100 customers today, some way or another, by tomorrow, a couple of those are going to be gone, or more, depending on what happens. And you've got to be constantly replacing that. If you have product problems, well, I manufacture an aluminum product. And product issues are always a problem. You've got to always be on top of it and make sure that, that there isn't something that's sent out to the customer that's going to make them say, hey, you know what, I got to buy something better for less, or I don't want that thing, send it back, It can be a major, major issue. Paralysis. That's the last one I've got up there for that, paralysis. Anybody know what that would mean what would cause that in a business? I'm going to get some water because I'm getting dry. Anybody have any idea what would cause paralysis? Beer? Oh, no water. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Well, y'all know what paralysis is.
Inertia.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Dan. Well, basically, what that means in a business is that you're stuck. You can't do anything, okay? You don't have the ability to make the changes that you need to make. That could be because of lack of finances. That could be because of lack of planning, a lack of a plan, a combination of any of these things, but you get stuck. You get into a situation where there's nothing that you can do. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to take these and I'm going to compare them one by one to what I see might be related to a church. The first one, customer decline. Can you all see that okay? Is that okay? Does that ring a bell? Lack of vital energy would be really, we have a health message, right? But if we are not energetic, if we're not healthy, if we don't have the wherewithal to get up in the morning and go, it's going to slow us down. Unbalanced customer profile, I would liken that to a generational gap. Anybody here recognize that? I don't know if it's just here, probably not so much represented in this room, but I'll get into that more later. But do you know what I'm saying? Loss of revenue, right? No business plan for growth. Do we know what our mission is? No sense of urgency, I would say, is probably, and that's my interpretation of it, but I think I'm partly right at least. If the church if we've kind of put the second coming off, Isn't that kind of the deadline? I had a deadline here, and I worked my butt off just to get to this point and do as well as I am, and I knew that come, 11 something, I had to be up here, and that was motivating, But isn't the second coming? Isn't that it? Isn't that the goal? If we don't have powerful leadership from the Holy Spirit, wouldn't it pretty much take the wind out of our sails? Almost put us into a state of paralysis, in a sense, jumping ahead. But are you guys seeing it? Am I the only one here? I see a few heads nodding, but is there anybody that doesn't see what I'm talking about? Losing to the competition. I was one of them. Right? How many of you have kind of felt that way? We drift. Sometimes we drift way off. In fact, there was a point in my life when I was so far out there, not really rebelling against everything I knew, and not turning really in my mind, my heart. I didn't turn my back on God, but I found myself in some really big messes, and it was so dark. You have no idea how dark it is when you're out there. No effective advertising? Well, that's our form of advertising, right? Evangelism. And if a business doesn't advertise, what does it do? Right? Product problems? Well, again, these are my words, but I kind of think it's maybe a gospel problem. Maybe not that the truth isn't what we have, or that isn't what we hold, but maybe the way we're living it out, or maybe we kind of believe it. It isn't so appealing. It's not good advertising. And paralysis. Everybody know what apathy is? Lukewarmness. We're kind of. I think we agree on that. Now, I didn't know who this guy was, but he made an interesting quote. He's I guess, American philosopher. I did a little bit of look on Google about him to see, what he's about, and he belongs actually to the Democratic Socialist Party of America or something, which kind of maybe, a little far left for us. But he's got something that I think that he has that says correct, Too many young folk have an addiction to superficial things and not enough conviction for substantial things like justice, truth, and love. What happened here? Oh. Well, if we're in business and we see a problem, we need to, first thing we do is we analyze it. Okay, and again, everything that I'm doing right now is kind of relating to the fact that I'm in business and that's my understanding of how I think things work. But Enron was an example, and even though it was a big old scandal and everything else, and it's an example of the fact that, how a business that was once great, having faith in that may not be always the best thing. But when we're in business and we see a problem, we're going to take a look at some things. And what do you think those things are going to be? We're going to be looking at, well, if you were going to buy a business, what would be the first thing you looked at, beside the fact that first you saw it and you liked it? You'd be going to the records, right? You'd be going to the books. You'd be going to the computer system. You'd be looking at sales records. You'd be looking at, what is it that's going on with this thing? Do I like it? Does it look like it's going to weather a storm? Does it look like it's on its way up, its way down? Do I want to deal with it? Do I want to buy it? There's a lot of things that you've got to do, and we need to analyze it. We need to take a look at our situation just like that. We need to do some calculations. We need to see what it is that got us here, and then we need to figure out what it is that it's going to take to do something about it. Well, I compared looking at the books to one specific verse in the Bible that you all know. How to be lukewarm, or the fact how we are lukewarm. I don't think we really need to read a whole lot more out of the Bible for that to know that. If we take a look at our customer base. Do we see what we want to see? Do we see that we have potential? Do we see that there's plenty of there's plenty of growth out there and things that we need to do? If we take a look at our situation, that is what we need to be doing. But that's also potentially our situation, and it does creep up on us. And that is something that I think that we need to examine as well. It's how much time we spend in the Word, how much time we spend praying. How can we fix this? Now, I think I missed some of these because as I'm clicking them, they're pictures I don't think I've even seen. But the point I wanted to make with this picture was that the church in history, if we look at the history of a business, we look at the history of a church. In history, the church has only grown when? I heard somebody? Under persecution. Is there any other time that the church has ever grown other than when it was under pressure? I know when I was started up my business, that was the time I grew the most. I was under pressure. I didn't want to lose my house. I didn't want to lose my position in life. I didn't want to, I didn't want to fail. And that is true. When things get tough, that's kind of how God works. And that's unfortunately what he didn't want to have to do with Israel, but he had to do it over and over and over again. And we've got to get to the point where we understand that if we don't get up and go before it gets too hard, it's going to be bad. And it may anyways. Our forefathers, speaking spiritually, dealt with these issues that we face. You guys, we are going to be up against it one day. It may not be exactly the same, but it's not going to be fun. And we've been told, I know I don't have all the quotes up here, but I know you would know where to find them, and I would too, and that is that if we don't take advantage of the time that we have, we're going to have to do it in good times. We're going to have to do it under very difficult times. The thing that Jesus says in Revelation 3, and you already know, it's the church to Laodicea, and that is because we think we've got too much, or we have too much. Maybe we don't think we have too much, but we do. We don't feel that we have a need of anything, and when we don't have a need of anything, it leads us to a false sense of reality, and we need to take a look at what's inside of that mask and see, hey, you know what? There's more to this. There's more to me than what I realize, There's something that is wrong maybe in myself, that would say, hey, you know what? I need to change that. I need to get out of that. I need to quit wearing this Christian mask and start being that, and work on the ungrateful heart, right? Anybody's cat ever do that to him? I love it because the scream is great. I did a calculation this morning. I didn't even know my own generation. Between 1965 and 1981, how many of you were born between that time period? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now I have no idea what the other church, in other words, if I were to ask that question, I have no idea how many hands would go up. But would you say that the ratio in the other church is the same as it is in this one? No? Anybody have any idea why, maybe? Why would it be that there are more Gen Xers here than there are in the other church? Bad question, but think, right? My generation, your generation, right? And if you think about it, now you may have been in an Adventist crowd all of your life, and I was myself until I left high school. I went to Adventist academies. I graduated from Loma Linda. I had friends in the group, but when I go back and I look now, and I wonder where they are, and I talk to them, and the same group of people that I grew up with, I went back to my home church where I grew up in Oregon. Was there for probably 15, 16 years of my life. It looks like that. And you know what? That's not even my church. That's somebody else's. So I know we're not the only ones. But the empty seats used to be filled by other generations, by their kids. When I was a kid and I went to church, it was busting at the seams. Granted, it was a little church, but I think it was probably true here and everywhere else around that time, back in the 70s and 80s and what was going on. But the same 20-some friends of mine that I grew up with, only one of them still is in church. And all of them were in academy, at church with me, my generation. And I find, ironic that the only one that still is my brother. And he's a pastor, so he has to, right? It's like I told him last night, I said, I'm going to put you in there. He says, yeah, you tell him I get paid to go to church. But it's to me, I find it really alarming, depressing, Do I want to come down to the second coming and know that none of those people I grew up with, right? And even if you're not a part of that generation, take a look at yourself, at your own, and see where are you at, where are they at, Those pews could have been filled. They could have been filled by the people that just stayed in the church. But now we have to go back to work to get them filled. And I'm hoping we start with those people. So what went wrong? If we were going to do a business analysis again, and we sent out to a third-party company to say, hey, you know what? I want you to take a look at what's going on and give us a report. This is kind of what something might come back looking like. Our church took its eyes off Jesus, and thereby we lost our vision. We then substituted rules for the gospel, which caused a lack of knowledge of the enemy tactics. So we couldn't tell our need for a sense of urgency and didn't feel that evangelism was of utmost importance. And we lost a generation, which caused a loss of membership, and that equates to a reduction in tithe, and because we became lukewarm and apathetic. If it's, I know this is probably a ridiculous picture, but, if this is something that we want to, in a figure of speech, avoid, when we are in business, if there is an emergency, which I think this kind of is, we're in a situation where we need to place a call for the members, or in business, the board members or the shareholders, to say, hey, you know what, we've got an issue, and we have to fix that. And when they have that meeting of the shareholders, you would say, that's when things happen. That's when radical things happen. That's when they take a look and they start pointing fingers at where the problem is. And that's when motivation either arises or you are gone. Heads roll. Things change. If there needs to be money put into it, they inject it. If there needs to be a new plan made, they build it. They're not going to fail because they're personally invested in it. Okay? And they want it to grow. Shareholders like what? Profits. Okay? And so does God. So if the business is in trouble, we do what's called a CPR. And so is what we would do with the church. right? I mean, isn't that kind of what we need to do? We need to bring it back to life, you know? And we need to do whatever it takes. And we can, because God has said that even though you're lukewarm, he still calls us, right? He still calls us to be revived. You know the verse. So I'll wrap this up with basically this. You guys are the shareholders of this business. And that makes you personally invested in it. If you choose to be, if I choose to be, we are, okay? And if we see something that needs to be done, we're the ones that have to make the decision to do it. So I guess, I just appeal to you and to myself. We need to go back to Jesus. We need to put our eyes back on him. And then start taking a look. Maybe have a meeting. Do whatever it takes. We have some evangelism coming up. We have things that are planned. I want to bring AFCO down here sometime and have them talk to us on the nuts and bolts, the practicality of how to go out and reach people. And I'm hoping that we have enough participation and vital energy and drive and God in our hearts to do it. God bless you.
On that note, something else we could do. Thank you, man. First sermon, you did good. You sweating?
Yep.
On that note, stay at 5:30.